is Oromo Voice Radio English program. Oromo Voice Radio is broadcasting to Oromia at 16-meter band or 17,850 kilohertz or on oromovoice.org website. OVR broadcasts Oromia Insight program every Monday for 15 minutes at 7:15 p.m. Oromia local time. Welcome to Oromia Insight program.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Ali Galato. Today we discuss President Obama's visit to Ethiopia and his implication for the Oromo with Mr. Tsegaye Ararsa from Melbourne Law School. Welcome, Tsegaye.
Thank you, Ali.
What is the visit about? What it is aim and why now?
Thank you, Ali. That's a very interesting question. As we have just listened to several media outlets, the president is set to go to the Horn of Africa, first to Kenya and then to Ethiopia. This afternoon he had an interview with the BBC about his trip to the Horn of Africa region, and he reiterated the purpose of his trip. And the purpose, he said, and this has also been stated by the Ethiopian ambassador to the U.S. a few weeks ago. It has been it's clearly presented by the State Department. And this afternoon he confirmed that his visit's primary goal is enhancement of economic cooperation and enhancing the existing security cooperation relationship between the countries of East Africa and the United States, and also raising the issues of human rights and democracy, which are of great concern to the State Department of the United States. And finally, to be able to take part in the AU Summit of Head of States in Addis Ababa. So these are the purposes and the reason given why President Obama is visiting the Horn of Africa countries now is, I think, a question of legacy. He mentioned that this is his last term, and he has been, as we know, he has been visiting all parts of Africa so far. He has been to Accra, Ghana, so that covered West Africa. He has been to Cairo, that covered Maghreb Africa, although it was facing eastward to the Middle East. He had made those phenomenal speeches on democracy and freedom in those two places. He has been to South Africa, especially in relation to the death of President Nelson Mandela. He hasn't been to the Horn of Africa region, but as we all know, the Horn of Africa region is a civilizational milestone, really, standing between the East and the West, and it has been a very, very important strategic ally to the United States government since the beginning of the 20th century, especially in the times after the Second World War, when America transformed itself into the empire without a colony, as someone says. So he said in his last years of my presidency, it's important for him to go and visit those places and encourage, he says, the existing potentials of the ferment of democratic rule and human rights in the regions. And he is aware that the region is not famous for its respect of human rights and democracy. And he said it is important for him to engage critically, to make blunt statements, but also engage them face to face. And he actually compared his visit to Ethiopia today with his visit to China, his visit to Russia, his visit to Burma, where he said after his visit, things have started to change for the better. So these are the purposes for which he is going: economic cooperation, security collaboration, raising the concerns of human rights and democracy, and engaging with the AU and trying to help forge a united voice with China and the European Union in their efforts to make a better trading partner in Africa.
What does it mean to the U.S. and what does it mean to the regime in Ethiopia?
Well, this is a very interesting point. To the United States, as you are aware, to the U.S., the president knows that there has been a long-lasting relationship with Ethiopia, over 105 years of diplomatic relationship. They know that America is one of the early empires, if you like, although America is an empire without a colony, that helped and recognized the inauguration of an imperial state in the Horn of Africa in the early 20th century. And it was part of the international legal machinery that operated towards the creation of the Ethiopian imperial state in the Horn of Africa in the model, in the image and likeness of the sovereign nation states of the West. So they know that this country that they are visiting now, that the president is visiting now, Ethiopia in particular, is a very important country for the United States in terms of security. In terms of security, it is important because, as you know, Ethiopia is known to be the deputy sheriff, quote unquote, the deputy sheriff of the United States fighting its war against terror in the Horn of Africa. So Ethiopia and Kenya and Uganda, for that matter, are some of the countries that are fighting the counter-terrorism wars that America globally fights, and particularly in the Somalia region. So it was a proxy war that they fight, and they are very important countries in terms of security. But more importantly, as I said earlier on, this is an interesting civilizational milestone, the whole region. It is between, civilizationally, it is between the East and the West, really, the Muslim and the Christian West, and the Muslim East. It's the link zone, and Ethiopia, as you know, being the home of both Muslims and Christians, is a good synthesis of that civilizational milestone. And to visit this country and encourage its pressures, the pressure it puts on what the U.S. considers anti-terrorism war, what Ethiopia considers its political repression war. So for the U.S., it is a very important security interest that it's there. It continues to use the Horn of Africa region as an instrument of control of this point of contact between East and West, especially in the context of the decline of Egypt and the rise of Ethiopia. As you know, since the 2011 crisis in Egypt, Egypt has been on the decline, a lot of instability and so on and so forth. So regionally also, it's not a very important ally anymore. It is a very important ally, but it's not a very strong ally anymore. So the second important reason for the U.S. To extend this visit to the region is its economic interest, of course, especially in Ethiopia. They still want to compete with the rising economic power, China, in the region, and the EU, of course, which is almost losing the competition in the area. They want to stay in the loop. They want to expand the space for global neoliberal financial capital in Ethiopia, and the space for their commodity, which they want to sell to the consumer society of over 90 million people in Ethiopia alone. So that's a very important economic interest. They want to explore the possibility of extracting natural resources because Ethiopia, as you know, the east and the eastern coast, the Somali region, for example, the Afar region, and the deep south in Oromia, and the west is said to be endowed with a lot of interesting natural resources, and there have been a number of explorations going on natural gas, oil, gold, tantalum, and so on and so forth. So they want to be there to advance that possibility of extracting natural resources through their companies. So they don't want to be on the losing end if it comes to the competition for those resources in the area, given the fact that they really are not happy about their dependence on the Middle Eastern oil. If they have another alternative market, they would be happy to use that. And again, they also want to expand the economic interests of the U.S. companies in there. And recently they have opened, by the way, an office. It's called Foreign Commercial Services Office. So they have established an office in Ethiopia recently, and this is only one of the 4 other offices in Africa. They have offices only in Tanzania, Mozambique, and Angola. And it's a very interesting institution that facilitates entrepreneurship in Ethiopia and teaches and inspires how to do business in America, how to do Americanized business. So that's the exact words that the person in charge gave a few weeks ago. So there is that, and they also want to leave out their liberal values of expanding trade and commerce. These are words that were used in the early 20th century to advance colonialism, but, expanding trade and commerce and business cooperation, other countries. So this is the economic side of the reason for why America really sees some stake in it. The other is, of course, as they said, it will be on the agenda, they said, human rights and democracy. And this is precisely the reason why many Ethiopians from the diaspora and from home, many Oromos resisted the visit. They have been demonstrating against the planned visit of the president, but the president has made it clear that it is on the agenda. The State Department earlier on has made it clear that human rights and democracy will be on the agenda. They said, especially in relation to Ethiopia, these are very sensitive issues. These are issues that he's concerned about, especially when he was confronted today with a question which says that you are meeting a government with 100% of the parliament seat taken by one political party. And he was very clear about it, that he has concerns and he will raise them. He says he will speak bluntly but also engage critically with them. So they want to, if you think about it, I have been working for the UNDP for some time. I have worked very closely with the Democratic Governance Unit of the USAID in Ethiopia. I have evaluated some of their programs. And if you look at them, their policies closely, really, democracy and human rights for Americans, of course, human rights means civil liberties, mainly civil and political rights, are very important to them. And they say they support these things in order for them to be able to live out the values of their own better selves. Now, they're not always democratic. They are not always respectful of human rights. They know that. They know that progress is happening over the years, that there is a black president in the White House now is an evidence of that, etc. But in their better selves, they also want to be a country that values and supports human rights and democracy. And by going there now and making this as an agenda of discussion, he thinks probably that the U.S. is really standing by its values. They are asserting their status as political and legal missionaries, as we call them in the legal field, because they try to export these technologies of governance such as election, democracy, rule of law, human rights, or civil liberties. So for the Americans, these are the major issues. And of course, they also want to put a lot of influence on the African Union as a regional organization. They have not been much present on the African Union phenomenon, because the EU has been modeling the African Union on the European Union institutional setup. It has been supporting it financially very much, and in fact it was basically a replication of the EU in the African continent. So America wasn't very much present in the process of supporting the African Union. So here comes a black president from the White House, and he wants to engage with them and engage with them very robustly at a time when Africa is slipping away from the West, especially from the European Union's political influence, and falling into the economic influence of China. For the Ethiopian regime, obviously the Ethiopian regime was already celebrating. In fact, it is so much of a good news for them that Barack Obama is visiting their country that the ambassador to the United States, Ambassador Girma Bru, came out to give a press release and a presser. In fact, he engaged with a journalist in an interview on that. And they are already celebrating, and they consider it as an evidence of the progress they have made, the economic growth they have achieved, the democracy they have dispensed in the country. They consider it as a matter of recognition by a very important country. Now that kind of, speaking as an academic, it kind of saddens me.
This interview will continue next week.